Brown paper packages tied up with strings. A little knitting story. My grandmother's knitting preparation for Christmas began months before the actual event. She would often frequent the markets in nearby towns, in her corner of Lancashire in northern England, to purchase local mill ends of fabric and yarn at the best possible price. After all, she grew up in the center of England's textile industry, when its mills were the workshop of the world in cities including Manchester, Wigan, Ormskirk, St. Helens, Blackburn, and Salford. Even today, the cotton spinning and weaving heritage of northern England is a source of great pride. My sister and I, on a couple of occasions, tagged along when we were visiting St. Helens, England, for the summer. We would get very strict instructions before the big day. We were to under no circumstances leave her side or my grandfather's. These markets were a rough and tough business. Pickpocketing was aplenty, along with sketchy characters and dodgy deals. My grandparents held our hands with an iron grip. I felt the air of a Dickens novel before me as we arrived. On market days, the skies were usually dark, and I remember that everything looked very gray or brown on the fiber carts that were piled higher and deeper. While the rainy and overcast weather of the north of England was partly to blame, there was also a great deal of industrial pollution at the time. Coal-burning factories were still in operation. Lancashire in the 1970s still had coal mining and textile production, especially cotton. Until 1979, the textile production industry was Lancashire's top employer. It is sad to think that within 3 to 4 years, this industry and its jobs would entirely disappear during the 1980s recession. Walking at these markets was treacherous as we jumped over puddles and mud, which was more like industrial sludge. The bartering rivaled that of an auctioneer at a cattle auction, and the crowds pushed and swayed. The noise was deafening. I held onto coattails as we maneuvered through the throngs of people. My grandmother was very skilled in digging through those tossed mountains of seconds, because from somewhere in that dark and dreary pile, she would discover the purple velvet fabric that my sister had requested for a diamond violet princess dress, a dress my sister still has almost 45 years later. My grandmother would also come across the perfect yarn for Intarsia horseback riding sweaters, as our latest passion was visiting the local barn to ride. I have no doubt that my mother's and my ability to finagle a good price comes from my beloved grandmother. She was a force to be reckoned with, especially when it came to finding the goods she needed for her Christmas gifts. When the purchasing was complete, she would always do a second search. Finally, with a sigh and a nod of her head, we knew the task was done, and off we would head to the car. Often, there would be a trip to the candy store for a treat on the way back. Sometimes we would go to the local chippy for French fries, as we called them, wrapped in newspaper. This was a reward indeed. When we got home, she would carefully organize, sort, and store the stash for storage in the attic. My grandfather would take the important instructions and carefully climb up the drop-down stairs to the yarn and fabric zone, where the goods would stay until they were needed. Over the course of the next few months, our grandmother would knit every night without fail. Cardigans and sweaters that featured our latest hobby of horseback riding, skating, and ballet. They would grace the front of each and every one of these garments. Doll clothing and Barbie outfits were also furiously worked on. When the time came, every item would be parceled up and land in a cardboard box destined for Canada, magical brown paper packages tied up with strings. My grandfather would get the honor of driving the brown paper packages to the post office and sending the box on its way. My sister and I would be on the other end in Canada, knowing that the box was coming from far and away. A letter would arrive instructing my mother of the parcel's departure date and when to expect the delivery. We waited with anticipation, and when it looked like it would not make it in time for Christmas, there it would be under the tree, decorated with handfuls of stamps. We would often take pictures of the two of us with the precious parcels, and we still have those today. Of course, the song Brown Paper Packages from The Sound of Music is one of our favorites. On Christmas morning, the British gift box would be opened with much delight, for inside there was almost more than what we expected. Jelly tots, chocolate buttons, and other treats from England would be hidden among the presents. We would carefully open every gift, and of course have a fashion show. Later, dolls and Barbies would get to try on their newest fashions. The dresses, sweaters, hats, and mittens would keep us going for another year of adventures in the snow, days at school, and trips to church and to visit my Canadian family on my father's side. We did not want for anything, although I do have to admit that the cotton lace socks often drove my feet crazy in the summer. My grandparents are long gone now, but when I think of them, as well as the long gone markets in the north of England, it always will remain a mystery as to how she managed to get everything done in time for Christmas. It was magical, but her love of family made it happen without fail. If you have enjoyed this story from My Wonderful Knitting Life YouTube channel, you can find other stories like this one on my channel. Thank you for listening.